Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let us talk.
Pastor Lawrence,
What's up? Why you always calling my name? What have I done?
what haven't you done?
Oh yeah, true.
Listen,
Many things.
Pastor Lawrence, look, the reason why we're sitting down for this conversation is this one may cost us our jobs.
Let it be. Let the chips fall where they may.
Can you please repeat that one
Let
more
the
time?
chips fall where they may.
The comments made by Pastor Lawrence do not necessarily indicate how I feel. But we're going to
I will
talk about
support
this.
him in case anything happens because
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is gonna go viral.
No, this one's hot. Look, today, those of you that are at home, we want you guys to talk a lot with us in the chat room.
In the chat.
Because this is one of those conversations that it's the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is everybody's got to work with somebody. And as pastors and leaders, we have the blessing, the benefit,
The privilege.
and the privilege.
Great opportunity.
Great opportunity, and sometimes curse, to work with all kinds of different personality types. And the reality is, as we sit here and we have this conversation today on Let's Talk, we're not saying that we don't frustrate people, but because we're the ones talking.
I don't frustrate anybody.
No, of course, you never do. But just in case you might,
Just in case.
how do we navigate working with difficult personalities? Like when you go down memory lane.
But listen, I could take a whole day to tell you what you're telling about memory lane, but let me tell you a funny story. This was a church I was going to, and I won't call the name of the church because it's a very, it's a very good church, thriving church now.
Well, the good thing is that because you've pastored
but
on
I-
3 continents.
Then nobody knows where it is. But
Correct, yeah.
and the pastor who told me this is no longer alive, so nobody.
Okay, good.
But he said to me, I was going to this church. He said, "Listen, this is a difficult church, but there's one man who's a difficult person to deal with." He said, "The years I've been there, he and I had never seen eye to eye." That's
never.
what happened. He said, "Listen, when you get to that church, because I met this pastor about
Yeah.
3 months before I went to the
Yeah.
church, right?
Yeah.
Sat down in his office and talked. So I said, this man, let me tell you about him. He's vindictive, he's vitriolic, and he will destroy a ministry." Those are the exact words.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I tell you what, when I met that man, he was all that the man said about him.
Wow.
But I said to myself, well, I usually just treat people the way I won't be vindictive towards him. But one day, the man called me. He said, "Pastor, there's a lady who's been coming to this church, and she's not a member. But, she is in the hospital right now, and she needs a visit. I'd like you to pay her a visit." So I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to do that." "Well, you pastors always say that, but you never do it."
Oh, wow. Wow. Wow.
So that was the first part of the story. So then I 2 days before I went, I said to him, it was a Sunday, I was going on the Tuesday to see the lady, because the hospital's far away. I said to him, would you mind coming with me? I'll come and pick you up. He said, "Okay, sure, you can pick me up at such and such time." I picked him up. This man, from that day, that man was nothing like anybody. To me, he wasn't. He was still the way the pastor said he was to other people, but to me, we were like, he would defend me to the last. Because he felt I was now doing what pastors should do and so on. But not all people do that. Some people just get you.
So what do you think the turning point was? Just that visitation?
That one visit changed it. That one visit changed his way too much. I could tell you about, when you read my book, okay? I'm saying that my good friend who died years ago now. Read my book when I write it.
Yeah.
But there are some people who, if you're not careful,
Yeah.
they will make your hair turn all kind of colors. If you have hair, that is.
If you have hair.
Yeah.
But you know what? You say something that's interesting, Pastor Lawrence, and I hear you, but I want to push back a little bit. So the idea that this gentleman's treatment towards you would change because you have now come under alignment as to what he believes a pastor should be.
Now you're talking.
I'm wrestling with that.
Now you're talking.
Because the reality is, that's one of the challenges of being a leader. Sometimes the church, people will love you as long as you do it the way that they say. But if you choose to go in a different direction.
Exactly. Because I have exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
In that church, first day I love this church now.
Yeah.
First day I'm in church. Finished. I didn't preach that day. I think the conference president preached because he came to introduce me. He says to me as we were going to lunch in the same building, in the youth hall, he said, "Pastor, I've been an elder in this church for 14 years. And if there's anything you need to know, just ask me. And I said to him, well, you know, normally I'd meet with all the elders and we'll talk about this. That upset him. Because as far as he's concerned, he is it.
Yeah.
So that's the other challenge you face when you don't do what people want you to do, because there are some people in church who think not only do they own the church building, but they own the pastor.
And you know what? That's a big cultural piece. And when I say culture, I don't mean Caribbean, African, Canadian, South American. I just mean that's the way that, you know, the church has always operated. And it leads me to believe that some of the changes that we have to make as leadership, you know, and I've been in ministry shorter than you are, so I don't have all the answers, but I do have a few answers. I think at times as leaders, we have to resist the desire to create our own personal peace during our own tenure for that which is best for the church, right? So, you know, like, sometimes you know that you just have to survive, right? We know that there are some contexts where no matter what you do, it is a fight for your life. You know, because sometimes that congregation, it's wounded, it's hurting. Somebody has dropped the ball or hurt somebody, and then you come in and you realize, look, if I do this, I can have peace from now until the Sabbath where they finally wave and
say goodbye.
But here's the struggle.
That thing is not the thing.
The struggle is, number one, that thing is not the thing. But number two, there's somebody coming behind you that's now going to have to fight a fight that you or I were not courageous enough to deal with.
That has been a problem in ministry.
Yeah.
And I think young pastors need to listen to this.
Yeah.
Because when you go to a church, you are leaving a legacy for your successor,
whether or not you want to.
Whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And so when you have to come in and fix what I've messed up, or please the people that I used to please, and you know, that's the thing. So we have to bear in mind that we have to do what is right. You know, not just what is pleasing, but what is right. Because, you know, in the church setting, there are matriarchs and there are patriarchs.
Yes.
And they really...
Are those real titles though, Pastor Lawrence?
Well, believe me, they are. There are people there who, because of their longevity and the influence that they've had, and some of these people are not necessarily educated people. They just have that presence. They have people go to them for this and the other. Their name means a lot to some people. And so when people hear them, they say, oh, you know, have you been in a board meeting, especially when it's not COVID time, and you call for the vote, and people are waiting to vote, they're watching to see whose hand is going up?
That hand is important. That first hand. And that hand is always the one that's saying, I move that, and I second, and they call question on the motion. And it's true. After a while, you begin to see the heads, and when they realize that you figured out who's really moving the room, even though that person may not say anything, then that's when the struggle begins, because now you know you might be fighting with Andre, but Errol is really the one who's pulling the strings. So then let me ask you this question, right? Because I want to make sure that we're balanced in this conversation, and so far we've talked a little bit about the struggle with perhaps pastors to church members. How do we navigate colleagues? Right? Because this is the elephant in the room, and I don't know if I've ever heard this conversation that's been had this kind of way, but sometimes even in ministry, amongst colleagues and people that you work with on a professional level, how do we navigate those difficult personalities?
You know, that is a challenge. And let me give you an example. There was a pastor friend of mine. I used to invite him to preach, all right? And he'd say yes. And maybe by Wednesday he called me and says, you know, something came up and I can't make it.
Oh, wow.
And it happened like 2 or 3 times in that period of time I was in that church. It wasn't until years later, both of us were in a different country. He said to me, hey, you know the reason why I didn't come to preach? I said, no. He said, well, if I came to preach at your church, then I have to invite you to preach in my church.
Oh, wow.
And I heard that you're such a good preacher that
wow. Interesting.
Jealousy in ministry. See, so when you think about that, there are some people who there's the jealousy. Now we have to remember that in ministry there has to be collegiality. Right? Notice this: if you are a great pianist
Yeah.
I invite you to come to church
Yeah.
to play for me. And when you've finished, I get up and I say, what a wonderful piece by Andre. We so love that. Give him a hand, everybody. But if, as a fellow preacher, and I'm in that church, and you preach a great sermon, and the people say, oh, Pastor Andrew, a great sermon.
Yeah, and the thing is, here's the thing that I've often wrestled with, right? And we're still talking about navigating difficult personalities and how you do it. We have to be able to let people sit with the fact that somebody who's visiting, they are going to have that experience, right? They don't have to labor with the same personalities week after week. As a matter of fact, what you may find is they're not as dynamic in their church
as they are
when they come to visit your church, because they're not looking at a person that they have to deal with at the board level,
business meeting,
prayer
home
meeting, visitation, whatever.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. I actually think that part of the reason why we have these relationships that are difficult to navigate is because of this thing called conflict management or conflict resolution. Most of us don't like to deal with conflict. So here's what happens. That child, right? Because we're talking about the journey. The child should have been disciplined at 7. You leave the child alone because you don't want them to embarrass you in public. That child becomes 14. The behavior changes, but their response to no is still the same. So now they become 25, 35, 45, 85. And because that parent didn't deal with the 7-year-old child, you're still dealing with the 85-year-old that is still 7. So my thing is, I just wonder if these difficult personalities would fade away after a while if people were courageous enough to stand up against it. Because here's the other thing. One of the things I've learned, number one, I don't fight with people the way that I would have. Even earlier in my ministry, I would respond a whole lot faster. Now, I say to myself, this meeting's gonna be over in about 45 minutes. Why would I destroy my entire day? But here's what I've discovered. When you find difficult personalities, at times, you have to call their bluff. You do.
Yeah, you've probably read the book Well-Intentioned Dragons.
But you're going to tell me about it.
Yeah, but you see, in this book, the author tries to show the types of people we have in our congregation. The people, for instance, would say things like, well, you need to pray for our pastor, Yes, he has some challenges. They're not telling what the challenges are.
Right.
They just drop it.
The seed. Just
drop it out there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You have people who will oppose anything you say.
Every time.
Yes, but let somebody else who they have been used to, say the same thing 3 weeks later.
Right.
Great idea! What a wonderful idea!
Oh man.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
No.
Time and time again.
Yeah. So sometimes, and I say to myself, I just have to let it go. If the argument, as you said, the meeting is going to be over.
Right.
And I've made up in my mind a long time ago.
Right.
I said, I must not let anybody upset me. I am the one, if I'm foolish enough, will allow what you say to upset me. And some people don't like that. They say, oh, you're not going to do anything about it. Well, why am I going to fuss over your foolishness?
Okay, but let me ask you this question, right? And maybe this question is the younger Andre in leadership and in ministry. I actually think that there is, at times, a blessing to allowing people to see how you really feel when they do that thing to you in the moment. You see, sometimes when you mull it over for a while and you try to share your frustration, people don't understand it because now you're completely calm. Now, I understand, you're not talking about arguing. You're not talking about yelling. But if I'm in a meeting and somebody does something that derails the meeting, which ultimately impacts your ability to move the church forward, coming back to it a month later is too late.
It's not going to work. No.
Right? So sometimes in the meeting with some of these difficult personalities, you have to deal with it there. But here's the other side to it as well. And all we're trying to do is just have some snapshots about navigating difficult personalities. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is when you come to understand why people are the way they are.
And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
You see, because I've had one board meeting in my whole life that has been the worst board meeting I can ever think of.
Yeah.
But some of us pastors don't like to confront. Why? Because when we leave, they should say, Pastor Lawrence is a nice pastor. And
Yeah.
that doesn't help the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't fight. Don't argue.
Yeah.
Be assertive. And don't be anybody's doormat. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to deal with the situations and then the outcomes. People respect you for it. Yeah. They don't respect us when we just let anything slide by.
Right.
They respect us.
You know, the other one is, and I want to just pivot a little bit more and say this, some of the conflict that we often also see is connected to your office and not to you.
Not to you.
You know, there are some people that they will never like a pastor, ever. And there are some who will always like a pastor. It's because of how they perceive the office of the pastor. And I know we're talking about pastoral ministry because we're pastors, but this is true of all leadership, right? So after a while, depending on how those that lead before you continue to lead, people make the assumption that this is what leadership looks like for that particular thing.
Yeah, but you know, some people don't even know what pastors do. I'll give you an incident. A lady came to me one day in a church I was pastoring. She said, "Pastor, I have a question to ask you. I've never asked a pastor this before.
What does he do?
What do pastors do?"
Yeah.
So I began to outline to her about the administrative side, the visitation side, the board meeting chair. She said, "Oh, you know, I always thought that pastors had a job from Monday to Friday. And then on Friday night, they made up a sermon, preached it, they took Sunday off and went back to their work."
And that might be true for some.
well, you see, this is the problem.
Right.
And because for some people, and I used to say this when I was ministerial, some of us, all we do is draw breath and draw salary at the end of the month.
Right.
Which is the bad example that people set and they believe that. So that same lady, I said to her, "Well, listen, I'm going to visit on Wednesday." That's usually the visitation day. I do hospitals, like, you know, go downtown and so on. She said, "Can you come? Would you like me to come with you?" I said, "You can come with me, no problem." We went 3 hospitals and 1 nursing home. At the end of it, she said to me, "I'm not doing this again."
Right.
It's too much work.
And you know what? I'm glad that you said that. And I know that there's a lot more that we will cover in future conversations because we have to come back to this. I'm so glad that you talked about this job shadow thing. Because the reality is most people think that they know what leaders do. And of course, every leader leads in a different kind of way. And I think that for some of the difficult personalities that we bump into that have to navigate us as we navigate them, they have to understand that not because a leader focused on that, does that mean that the leader was balanced.
That's correct.
It is possible that they did really well with that.
One thing well, yeah.
But there's some other things that were neglected. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing. There is no book that can truly cover balance in the context of any assignment. Right? You can talk about it as much as you want to, but every church is different.
Actually, there's a book called Balance, and I should read because some pastors just they become people pleasers, and that's the problem. Because if you do that in your congregation, and I succeed you, and then I'm not doing what you know what people feel. And the problem with some of us too is that we always. In this whole idea of balance, we like to hear people say, "Well, you know, when I called Pastor Andrew, he was always there. I called him 2:00 in the morning, he was there.
If
I called him,
good.
No,
that's not always good.
You cannot always be everywhere.
That's right.
So you have to be able to say, "Sorry, I can't do this at this time."
Yeah.
But some members think, "When I call you, you must be there. I'm paying your salary."
Right.
But you're human just like them. So you must have a time to relax. You have a family. You got to care for your family. You got to You know, somebody called me one time, and I hope the person don't remember who they are now. Said, "Pastor, I was just here in the country." Said, "Pastor, what's the best way to get to Michigan? I'm going to Andrews University." You know what time that was? That was like 11:30 at night. So I gave them the direction. So I said, "Buddy, when are you leaving?" "Oh, maybe sometime next week, one day. I'm not sure which date is it." "Now, why are you calling me at 11:30 at night to ask me for directions?" I mean,
but that's also, and I've done it too. That's because we at times allow people to have access to us, and so they become familiar. And I'm guilty. I've taken I've taken some phone calls, and I'm like, "How can I help you?" Like, I can't help you. And then I realize you're not really looking for help. You just want
trying to be in touch. Yeah, I know. So balance is important, and for all of you listening out there, whether you're pastoring or not, you've got to have balance in your life. Otherwise, Jesus said to his disciples, "Come ye apart and rest a while." And if you don't come apart and rest, you're gonna come apart.
So here's the thing. This one we know is going to get you talking. Share your comments. If we even missed something in our conversation today, please put it in the chat room. We'll be watching, and maybe we'll have a response to some of what you have to say. But all we're trying to do is just talk.
Let's
just talk.
So don't forget to like and subscribe
and share.
And we'll talk again.
All right.